Welcome, book lovers. It is Phil Svitek and Marisa Serafini joining me. And for our kind of slightly unofficial book club edition, we are talking about the final book in the Poppy War trilogy by RF Kuang called The Burning God. It's literally the Poppy War is the first book we ever did. And then because we had so many other books, we never actually completed the trilogy. Marissa did, and I finally caught up. So we are complete with it, and we love this series so much that we felt it would have been a shame not to discuss it, even if in slightly imperfect, not on normal standard terms. So last we left our hero of Rin. She had essentially joined forces with the Dragon Republic, much to her dismay, because at the end she learned that they were never her friends to begin with. So her and Kate leave, and that brings us to this book. And so just to kind of provide a summary of everything, and then we'll dive into the deeper aspects. So Rin now very much wants to lead a coalition and essentially take over the whole damn country. And she starts to do that with the Southerners, and she builds more and more armies. But as what she discovers is that there's a spy within her midst. So Neza, who is next in line for the Dragon Republic, he's essentially knows exactly what Rin is doing, and lo and behold, that ends up being a disaster because they catch Rin and everyone else off guard. So the Dragon Republic, along with the Hesperians, which is basically like the U.S. analogous faction, wipe out basically everyone in this town. Rin manages to survive, but everyone's the leaders are pissed off at her because she's being used as a pawn of like, hey, give up Rin, and then the war ends. And they want that, except she says, apropos that, hey, they're lying to you. Luckily for her, the Empress, whose empire has fallen, she finds her way to Rin, and with her abilities she's got like the Jedi mind trick abilities. She's like, hey, Rin's gonna go this way, and we're all gonna go on this little adventure. So they go to the Chulukorik, which is a mountain where you essentially enslave shamans. And so that's what they're about to do. But the real trick of it is, actually, we're going to release Master Jing, who was her master at her military academy. We're going to release him. The plan being that, hey, we're going to get the trifecta back together and going to wipe out everyone. But first, we're going to go save Kate, who is bound to her, who is a prisoner in this very advanced city that she's never been to, but the Hesperians kind of flipped it on its head and made it very grid-like, and there's lights and she's like, where the hell am I? And that makes her question of are they good? Are they bad? What the hell's going on? Anyway, they save Kate, and kind of make their way towards where the original emperor is, the last missing piece of the trifecta. As this happens, people warn her not to do this. Eventually, they go and do it. They wake up the emperor, who is pissed and heinous. But there's a battle. Through this battle, a lot of the airships get blown up to smithereens. Everyone dies pretty much, with the exception of Rin. And she realizes that, okay, there's a way to defeat the airships and so forth, and she's going to train shamans. So these young kids get a rough course in shamanism. One can heal stuff, one can manipulate earth, and one can poison anything she touches.
Yeah, that's like a crash course of all the three types of people you need in a battle.
Exactly. And so then they have this, so they continue towards the Dragon Republic's capital, amassing more and more troops as they go along, while keeping the fact that they have shamans hidden, so that way they can, spur of the moment, do what they need to subtly. And the plan is essentially they want to poison the water and kill the dragon that gives Neza his powers. Except that doesn't happen. They do awaken the dragon, chaos ensues, but the Hesperians manage to like be the real winners here, and like defeat the dragon. Although Neza now, essentially control is given over to Rin. Neza and his team are essentially vanquished, although Rin doesn't feel great about it. And ultimately, as they start ruling, what Rin realizes is that she's always constantly looking out for assassination attempts and this and that. And slowly but surely, she realizes that the only way forward is if Neza rules and makes peace between their country and the Hesperians. So she sacrifices herself for the betterment of her people. Tragic story, but there it is.
There it is. No, that was a great summary. Yeah, no, I think you said it very well. I think it got to the point where once, she finally got into power, her and Kate is like, all right, you fought all these battles, you fought all these people, you're finally here. People are listening to you, you have leadership, you have authority, all that. And then, but because she's so war torn, she's just stuck in this mentality of like always like hyper adrenalized, like always just super vigilant. She can't enjoy now just being in power, and just because she just always thinks she's in constant fight mode. And I think that's where she's losing, like throughout all these books, she's slowly losing her humanity. But now she's just literally just a warrior. She is nothing else. All she knows how to do is survive and not live.
Yeah. And she does. I mean, she like that last battle, she has to will the Phoenix to fight for her, right? Because I mean, the Phoenix is essentially like, I can't take on this damn dragon. And she's like, hell yeah, we will. Like, I don't like, let's go. But I think the more tragic aspect of it like when I look at the totality of it, it's the idea like there's no simple solutions, right? And you have the Hesperians who are on their crusade saying there's just one singular God, yet she knows different of like, no, there's other gods. But there are aspects to the Hesperians that are good. And so it's like she's constantly caught in this torment. And if anything, it's the fact that she essentially gives up power at the end willingly, for the betterment of the country. Like that's the true sacrifice, that she didn't need to seek power in the end. She's like, no, there is a path forward, but it's without me.
Right. And I think that what was like the biggest character growth for her is like throughout the first two books, she always thought she would be the best leader. She is the best person to be in position to bring peace and harmony within these countries and within everyone. She can unite people in that way. And because she was like so, I guess you could say open-eyed and, ignorant, in just her naivety and being new to everything. But once she finally seen everything, dealt with so many people, by the end she realizes, oh, she might not be the best person. And like that self-realization, like, oh, I'm just as toxic too. Like I'm not a great person. I'm not the best person for this position. So like just that awareness, I felt helped with her character growth. Like, oh yeah, she's also part of the problem.
Yeah, and I mean, in an odd way, right? She so rebelled against authority to begin with, and then with the Dragon Republic, the book, she learned that perspective of it. And in this one, she spends so much time with the Empress, and she doesn't really like her, but more and more she starts to understand the choices that the Empress made, and that they're not really this similar from hers. So, and I don't know, I found that a very interesting comparison, especially like after the defeat, Kate and Ren are drinking, and they allow Neza to essentially come and join them in this temporary ceasefire. And it's like they're the weird trifecta. So I found the parallels of the trifecta very engaging, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on, the original versus, did you look at them even in that way, Kate, Ren, and Neza?
Right, and we're talking about like the generational choices too. So it's like we've seen the devastation of the original three, the big three. We see how toxic they were and how terrible they were for everybody in all the countries. And here we have this potential young, new big three, so to speak. And but they're so already influenced by the original, they're like, oh, are their choices for them? Is it really for a better future? Or are they just repeating history? Um, like they think they're learning, but really they are just extensions of the original three. And they're like, oh no, it was like they could be good. They have the potential to be better, make better choices for a happier future. But they're so alike their original leaders that it's basically just a continuation of more devastation. So is it really better, even though you change the power, so to speak, into new hands, but they still have the same mentality of the old guard. I was like, is that safe? Is that better for us? And I think it was that when they realized it's like, oh no, we're not great either. I think that's where they had to make the choices on their own if they really wanted to make a positive change moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, there was that one part where Rin's like, really, this is more towards the end before she makes the final sacrifice, but she's going through it mentally of like, okay, um, we're gonna we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna fight the Hesperians, and then once we conquer the world, there will be peace. And it's like that seems
Yeah.
like a never ending thing. And to your point, the cyclical aspect of it, this is the third Poppy War as far as Nakara's history. So just in and
Hmm.
of itself, like the fact that it's the third Poppy War, like you don't have different names for it. It's literally the same war.
Yeah. Just different people, different names, but same mentality. History repeats itself.
Yeah. And if anything, yeah, it's the one constant is the devastation for all these people. You know, and is the ending hopeful to you at all? Because like part of it is, hey, the Hesperians have rice and other stuff, and if we just open up trade routes, like we might be able to coexist.
Right.
Like is
I
it?
I I felt near the end where she finally had power, she was so driven to the point where she also doesn't see the bigger picture of like, oh, this could also cause more devastation. This could cause more drug problems. And I thought other people within that circle, within her orbit, basically saw how powerful she was getting and how bad her mentality thinking was, and like how they can negatively affect people. And they were trying to take away her power. They're like, oh, you want these flowers? We're going to burn them for you. We're going to literally burn your power, take away your money, take away the economy because you wanted to rule the city with all the money, but like we took that option away from you, so you can't. So it's like even the people around her were saying she's becoming too powerful, that they were trying to stop her in different ways. And then I feel like she finally got to the point like, oh no, they're right. They did me a favor. They did me a right to like check like the whole checks and balance systems. Like they brought her back down, I guess, down to earth because she was getting too big for her britches. She had these delusions of grandeur. Um, and again, she didn't see how bad she actually was, like how toxic her thinking became and how negative she could have impacted people.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
just even
yeah,
in our long, like now she was ruling a whole nation. But even within the capital, it's like the pipes were bursting, the this, the that, and it's like, wait, I gotta do what now?
right.
And so just the day to day aspects of ruling. Again, she's a great warrior. Um, to be honest, I still have my doubts of like how great a general she ultimately is and was. Because I mean, when she started, she led the psych, but I mean, even by the end, everyone's just a tool to her, and like the three shamans in particular. Um, it's so interesting, especially the one sister, right? Like she reminded me of Rin, the one who poisons people. Um,
Mm,
like she kind of had that same just vile hate. Like it's not coincidental that her power is to poison people. you know. Um,
right. And I feel like that's the balance. There's always someone who was like there to balance Rin out. When the Phoenix became too powerful, Kate had to help stabilize the power. When she was getting too powerful, just economically, they took out the flowers, and so I feel like there was always someone who had to like keep a leash on her, so to speak. Um, and I think that was good because God forbid she had so much potential and she's so young too and heavily influenced. As much as we love our protagonist, we have to realize that, hey, maybe she's not the greatest protagonist that we think.
no, and I mean that's what I really appreciate about these books in general is that they are unrelenting. I mean, the horrors of war, they do not shy away from. Um, I mean, the famine aspects, the bloodshed, the rape, all those things, like just the realities of war, and all at the same time not having a fully clear, well, who's the good guys and who's the bad guys, because
Hmm.
I don't think that's real life necessarily either.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you're so involved in something, I felt like things weren't black and white with her anymore. Everything was gray, and she was just getting confused of like, who does she trust? Whose side is she on? Are her intentions actually good, or is this something that someone trained her to do? Um, is she brainwashed in certain ways? I was like, it's all those questions like, oh, what is she really all doing all this for?
you know? Well, that's the whole thing with these gods is that whatever their sort of nature is, that seeps into you, and the phoenix wants the world to burn, but as is the phoenix's nature, out of that will come something else, right? So it's creation by destruction, and quite literally she accomplished that by the end you know
Yeah. And ironically, she became the most self-destructive person. And what me? I'm sorry, you're gonna have to remind me. Was it this book where there's that moment where there's the two warriors, the two I think sister warriors, and they're like
yeah, yeah,
scrounging for food and all that.
yeah.
And I felt like this was probably the one moment that like she was trying to like tap back into that humanity. She could have killed these two people on the spot, but she showed acceptance and patience, and she let them live. In a world full of war where she could have just killed them instantly. She gave them like some leverage and showed mercy. And I was like, oh, that was like a bright spot. I was like, oh, there is hope for Rin. If she's like allowing people to live, she can actually choose and like think of things objectively rather than emotionally. And I thought that was an interesting character moment that like gave us some, I don't want to say false hope, but I was like, oh no, the like she could be a good leader, but ultimately didn't.
Well, I think where it really went off the rails, and the book never answers this question, much to my chagrin. Brilliant, but still annoying. Who the spy was. So she thinks by the end that it's Venka, and then she even starts blaming Kate. And I just want to get your perspective. Did you have someone who, through this whole time was the spy? Was it Venka? Was it Kate?
Oh gosh, I don't know. And I think that's where therein lies the whole question too, because so many people are now involved. and she doesn't know who to trust anymore. I hoped it wasn't Vanka because they made so much progress in just being allies for each other. And then for Vanka to be the spy, I was like, oh no, you're ruining like the one good relationship that you kind of need right now. And then I hope it wasn't Kate because we just know the way that Kate was written that he's just a good guy. He's naturally a genuine, like the most genuine guy. And for him to be a spy, I would have burned the book. I would have been so mad, god damn it, if he turned out to be the spy. So I just hope for them because after two books by this point, um Rin and Venka and Kite have been through so much that it'd be like literally a shot to the heart if it ended up being one of them, and that would have like broke the camel's back, and Rin would have just been ape shit, you know?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. The fact that she never gets an answer is even more insidious, right? Because all she can do is wonder, and she'll never know the real answer. And if the two people, if there's even a question mark of the two people that she was closest with and that potentially could have trusted, much like she used to trust Neza, who quite literally stabbed her in the back.
Stabbed her.
It's like, yeah, where do you go from there when your natural instinct is to literally be distrusting, and yet if you're going to make any sort of peace alliance, you kind of have to have that blind faith that it's going to be okay.
Yeah, people are good. Um, yeah, that's why I didn't think it was them because we already had so much heartbreak and disappointment with Neza. I was like, if we got more disappointment and one of her closest quote unquote allies turns out to be a spy, I'd be pissed. I'd be like, no, she needs at least some healthy, more stable relationships to keep her going. That's why she stuck around for so long. You know, she had people to keep her in check.
Yeah, I mean, she both had people to keep like there. That's what I'm saying when we talk about the gray areas of this. There's a lot of ideologies that clash. Even obviously, like Neza has his own viewpoint of how Mikar should be run, the Empress, and we even meet Chakan, who is the one that essentially reveals um, to Rin that it was the Emperor that essentially said, "Hey, burn all the spear leaves down," which is her people, and she still makes the choice to try to awaken him because it's. So yeah, I'm curious about the reveal of that and her decision to continue on in that path. What do you think of that?
I feel like she got to the point where she doesn't trust herself. Like she knows she can get results when she calls upon higher power, higher being. So it's like she's just conditioned like, okay. Um so I think that's also why like she went and made that choice too. It's like, no, no, no. If I did this, then I know this is a short thing, calling on external power in that way. This just because that's how she's trained. Her by herself, she couldn't do it. She needs other people to help her accomplish what she needs to do. And so she's just trained to hone her
I mean,
resources.
I mean, there was obviously a reverence for her former master, Master Zhang, and when that initial battle, when they're kind of like all escaping, and yes, she is powerful, but damn, like what she was such in awe of him. It was like watching Alton again, where he's just like, he's got these shadow puppets, and they're just taking down airship after airship, and she's like, "Whoa, I can do some stuff, but whew, look at this guy."
Right.
And he's
Right. And I think that's the thing. It's like she's so enamored with external power. She knows she can't ever hit that level. So on her own. So she has to call upon those beings. I think she's addicted to it. She's addicted to seeing power and overtaking things.
I mean, her biggest thing was like she needed to control. Like, unlike them, she can't just unleash her full power because then everyone dies, right? So it's like, otherwise, like her perfect thing would be just her in the middle of just dropped in the middle of enemy armies, and it's like a 50-mile radius of just enemies,
Go
and then
crazy.
boom, unleash the Phoenix.
Yeah, she's like a well, to make a cultural reference, is like what was it? Avengers Infinity, when you just drop Scarlet Witch in the middle and they're like, and she just like unleashes hell on everyone. They're like, she was in the tower the entire time. Come on. Like I feel like Ren's like that. You drop her in, let her do her thing, but then you pull her out. You know, she's the bomb, so to speak. It's like she's good for a moment, but you gotta contain her, you know. She's good temporarily.
Yeah.
And that was her whole struggle, because like, man, you give her too much freedom and too much range, like she has no control, no self-control.
Yeah, and I mean, quite literally, she's a junkie, right? And like, with her three disciples, I mean, she's very blunt about, you will either die or you will go insane, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Pick your
she
poison.
knows, and they seem to accept it, sure. Um, but like, yeah, I mean, she's just feeding them drugs to get them to call the gods, and then shoving them with opium and almost making them OD. Like it's, and I've always liked that aspect of it, that anyone can really tap into the gods. It's not like this, thing that's like for the chosen one, but that it also comes at a great cost of like, you're literally just doing drugs and hallucinating to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like you tap into this temporary power and that's it, but it doesn't make you see clearly. It gets the job done, maybe not in the healthiest way, but it's effective.
It literally breaks your brain because your brain is not adept at that sort of perspective of reality.
Yeah. It lowers her human inhibitions and she becomes more of a god. So she thinks in a different way. Therefore, she can act in a way that her human self wouldn't allow her to. Um, I don't think the human self would allow all this devastation, but the god in her definitely would. And that's why she gets addicted to the ability that's like, hey, I am capable of doing this, but it's not just me. It's an external thing. Um, and that's why, drugs and addictiveness, it really is like people's vices. And that's what they definitely tapped into her weaknesses there, was her addictions.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And um, I mean, again, like whether it's ayahuasca or whatever, like drugs have been used very ceremonially, right?
Hmm.
You know, for healing and for other stuff. And that's what I appreciate. Like, I love that there is no middle ground here. It's like, you're left wondering, yeah, okay. And like all things, that is the thing of, okay, if we train more shamans, and then it's like having an infinite number of atom bombs, you know?
Yes.
Um,
Yeah,
like,
because she was an atom bomb. And I think the thing is, it's like what I finally got at the end is like finally made a humanistic rash decision
mhm,
that she finally realized would cause the least amount of destruction was a human choice, not a god choice. That was the one last like little sliver of humanity she had left in her, and the one thing that she did do and contribute to, like, oh no, in order to save people, I'm gonna save them from myself.
yeah. And that's like, on its surface, like the gods aren't bad. It's just when you bring them forth, uh, there's only a limited number, right? So the idea is that there's 64 of them, therefore they create a balance of checks and stuff like that, right? When you just unleash one god into the world, there's an imbalance,
Yeah.
you know, quite literally. So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, And when we read 3 books with this character and we've seen everything that she's gone through, and she is not the same girl who went through training, who just wanted to get out of her hometown, you know. She became a completely different person, unrecognizable person. And all we wanted her at the end was to like still retain that humanity. And I feel like she did. Even the slightest sliver left of humanity, she still used it. And granted, she died, but um I still felt like there was still hope for her a little bit, even though it felt like it was all completely lost. I was like, no, at the end, she's still a good person. She still made a good choice to save people.
Yeah, and that's the hard part. And when I say like her and the Empress are similar, it's she learned that even good actions do have consequences, right? Like when they were traversing all these towns and there's people starving and begging, and then she throws them a little bit of her food. Well, now you have people killing each other over this tiny bit of food. It's like, well, that's not what I wanted. Um,
Yeah.
but also, let's talk about. So she does return to her hometown, which obviously talk about being a changed person. Like, we all leave our hometown, and then when we come back, it feels different because we're different. This is a whole nother
Hmm.
level of it.
Yeah. And she comes back and she's in a different level of power. She actually has say. People know her name. People, I wouldn't say respect her, but are now intimidated by her, you know? Like people bullied her at the beginning of the story, and now she's the person who like no one messes with. She like so she's changed in that way, and just her mentality of the people in the town like, "Oh, this town hasn't changed, but it's worth saving." Um and I get that. And it's not to make her think that she's better than everyone, because, like, remember your roots. But it's also like she's in a better position to actually do something to help the town than she was when she began. And I think that's what people don't realize. Like, then that's what I don't even think, like, I mean, she got to the point where she realized she can actually make a difference now. Now that she's gone through all this, she has power and authority. She can actually actively do something to actively make change in that town.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about her arc, by the end, she realizes that yeah, not everything has to be a literal fight because certainly that's Kate's sort of message to her. And in many aspects of the book, when she came across towns that were just decimated, she didn't understand. Well, like, why didn't you fight? It's like, well, they would have lost. Yeah, but you fought. Like, you know what I mean? She's like,
Hmm.
you don't give up, you fight. And they're like, no, but we survived. Yeah, but you didn't fight. And by the end, she kind of starts to realize maybe that's a flawed ideology that the only thing you can and should, even if it's a losing battle, is just to fight. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes not everything is solved with fighting. Some things are just solved with rash decision making. And I feel like she got to that point.
Yeah, poor Kate. I mean, he's the real tragedy of all of this. Like every time she
Oh,
lost her
Kate.
powers by being anchored to her, he's just like, hey, I'm okay, I'm okay.
Yep. He was like the kicking bag, so to speak, the punching bag. Um, she went through the fire and he felt it all.
Yes.
Poor Kate. Uh, but I love Kate as likable as he is, even though he literally suffered all the pain. I loved that dynamic between those two. Like they were good friends, they were around the same age, like they've been through the same things. They have different mentalities, yes. But again, with the whole checks and balance system, he was good for her. As toxic as she became, he was like a consistent, constant, healthy, positive constant in her life that kept her grounded. And she needed that. We needed that. Just as the audience readers, we're like, we need someone good that we can constantly trust in this story. And it was Gate.
Yeah. Yeah. One other thing, let's talk about her master, right? So they awaken him, and she has such a reverence for him. and slowly two things kind of start to happen. Number one, she realized she starts almost getting upset with him that he didn't teach her everything. Um, and number two, she's like, holy hell, this guy is messed up. And what did he do? Because he did some, yeah. Because who he was as Cinegrad, the military academy, was a
Right.
fool because his mind was cooked from everything he'd done. Like, to borrow from Unforgiven, the Clint Eastwood movie, back in my day, I killed women and children. Hell, I might have just killed anything at one point that ever moved or crawled across this earth. you know? So,
Yeah.
yes, I'm interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, and I think it just shows that even your leadership, her leadership in her life is like no one's perfect. They all go through their own battles and struggles and stuff. And I think she realizes like, oh right, you were supposed to be someone who taught me everything. But you're also messed up in your own right. So she like you have to delineate between someone you idolize and someone who's also just there who taught you whatever you needed to at that moment, at that point in your life. Um, and I think she got to the point where she realizes, like, oh no, you're messed up too. I'm messed up. We're all messed up. Um, but she still had that level of respect for him, and I think that's what she needed. Um, someone to really give her kind of like an idea of what could have been a great leader, the potential
Also,
of
and
good
also,
leadership.
like, it's the ghost of future, right? Like, that's who you could
Mhm.
become. Which is why also I think when we talk about the ending, um, I think she was very much inspired by him because his last act of life was to save Rin. You know, he's like, listen, not that it's like explicitly stated as such, but it's like, yeah, he made a crap ton of bad choices, did a lot of terrible stuff, but he did this like if not that he can ever atone necessarily, but at least he'll do the right thing as his last and final act. You know.
Yeah, right. No matter like how much of his humanity that he lost, at the end he did something right, and that's what she also did. She destroyed and killed several people, but at the end of the day, she still did several's being a little nice. Um, But it's the same idea because at the end of the day, she did something good too.
Yeah.
Um, Her last act was saving, essentially saving other people.
Yeah.
Someone saved her, so she's going to save others.
Indeed. All right. Well, there's plenty other stuff to definitely dissect, but I think we're overall good. But I want to give you at least the final opportunity to close us out on this series. Any final thoughts?
I mean, I thought this was so well crafted, so many twists and turns, and people who we wanted to be friends with, people who we wanted to have to relationships with. You know, me, I'm a woman. I was like, yes, let's get this romance in, and then everything went to hell. So it's like, I I feel like every character had their purpose, whether they be good or bad, but like all the balances and what makes a government, what makes a war, and all the choices that we're just fighting each other. Like, and sometimes our biggest enemy is ourselves. And I say from the small girl who like literally just had to carry a pig just to build her strength and conditioning to get into a school, like where she started off as such a small and meek character became the biggest villain in her own right. It's like the whole character arc. I did not see that coming. Because I mean, if you remember our first conversation, I was like, "Oh, I like her. I still like her. They're still, she still
I
has
look
a
back
chance."
on
And then
that.
like, "Oh man, that went to shit."
Yeah, I always
And
wondered about that. I was like, you think
right,
she just killed everybody? You think she did that because
right, like
of the goodness of her heart?
I was trying to be optimistic. I was like, "There, she can still be saved." Um, And in the end, she ended up taking herself off to save others. It was like her biggest weakness was herself. But I have to give it to the author. I love well-crafted stories and well-crafted, complex, layered characters like Rin. She had her flaws and she was very aware of that, and that's what makes, and I love strong feminine protagonists too. Um, Always. So to have a character who was so flawed, yet we were still rooting for her at the end of the day, and to read 3 full books about her, yeah, I was like, there's something special about Ren that kept us still wanting to be with her and see her entire journey, despite how many people she killed and all the people that like did her wrong. Like we were still rooting for her at the end of the day, and we still kept with her journey. I loved Ren.
Rin was good. I definitely love the lore, the world building, all that. So yeah, I think it's wonderful. My only criticism, if I have one, is I think in an effort to like get all these books out, I would just compress book 2 and 3 just a little bit, and book 3 in particular. Not like, I think that like there's paragraphs where certain sentences just repeat within the same paragraph, and so like I'm not telling you to omit anything. Just take out a sentence here and there, and you'd be surprised how much you can take out of the book and still have it be the book. That's my only note. But then again, who the hell am I? I didn't write a trilogy. That's like the New York Times best-selling trilogy. So,
No, but that's a fair assessment. You're an author yourself too, so like you've gone through editing process. You know what could be redacted, taken out, and all that. So, like, yeah, that's also an artistic choice too. So I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I just get the feeling that the first book there was more time to really make it as tight and like efficient as possible, and then it just seemed like 2 got a little bit looser. Again, not that they're bad. It's just there's certain lines where it's like, okay, this is like a repetition. I don't think we need it. So, but again, I mean, she put out a book a year, so damn.
Right. And I was like, she had a fast turnaround. So
Yeah.
it was a lot to compress in a short amount of time.
Yeah. All while going to Yale. So let's not forget that fact.
Right. I was like, girl's a legit genius. So I'll give her props to her.
Yes. So anyway, and she's written 5 books as of right now, all very different technically. So
yeah,
there's, if we're counting like the Poppy War is like one set, it's fantasy. Then she has kind of like a more grounded book, and then kind of like a different type of fantasy.
Right. I also recommend Yellowface, also by her. Completely different story, not about warrior, but about really a humanistic character of like why we do the things the way we do and for the approval of others. Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. Girl's got range.
Yeah, she definitely has range.
Not a one-trick pony. So, all right. Well, we have enjoyed it. It's been quite a journey. How long has this been? 2 years, 3 years at this point?
Yeah, about 2 years, 2.5. I feel. Yeah.
But thank you as always for joining us. We hope you'll join us on our regular episodes. And yeah, we'll see you next time.